The boardroom was deathly quiet, broken only by Dad's patronizing chuckle reverberating off the polished mahogany walls. I'd known this day would arrive eventually. 3 years quietly growing my investment portfolio while my parents dismissed every suggestion I'd ever made about their floundering tech company. 3 years of Emma. Let the adults handle this at every family dinner. Still, I hadn't imagined it unfolding exactly like this. Richard and Patricia Chin had turned Chin Technologies from a garage startup into a 25-year-old empire, producing specialized aerospace circuit boards and dominating a niche market for decades. The past 5 years, however, had been merciless. Overseas competition, stalled innovation, and some frankly disastrous financial moves had drained the company. I was their only child. Emma, the one they deemed a waste of a degree for studying computational finance and applied math at MIT after graduation. I took a position at what Mom dismissively called my little job at a boutique Boston investment firm. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just an analyst, I was a partner, running a portfolio I'd built meticulously over 3 years, turning my early savings and stock options into a fortune sizable enough to shock anyone. The emergency board meeting was convened because Chin Technologies was teetering on bankruptcy. Credit lines maxed out, 2 major clients alienated by delayed deliveries, and a potential bankruptcy looming in 60 days. The board had been in session for 2 hours before I arrived. I slipped in late, taking a back seat intentionally. Mom noticed immediately. "Emma, what are you doing here? This is a board meeting." "I was invited," I said calmly. Dad snorted. "Invited? Sweetheart, this isn't a social call. We're discussing serious business. I understand that. Do you?" I shot back, my voice even as I opened my laptop, letting silence punctuate my words. The room shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew why I was there. My attendance had been demanded by the chairman, but clearly my parents hadn't been informed. CFO Marcus Webb tried to redirect. "Richard, Patricia, perhaps we should continue the agenda and review refinancing proposals." "In a minute," Dad said, his gaze still fixed on me. "Emma, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is highly inappropriate. These discussions are confidential." "I'm well aware of the situation," I replied. "Revenue has fallen 42% over 3 years. Operating losses hit $18 million last quarter. At the current burn rate, you have maybe 8 weeks before running out of cash." A stunned silence fell. Mom's face turned red. "Where did you get those numbers?" "I reviewed the preliminary reports last week. They're confidential," Dad barked. Thomas Harrison, the chairman, cleared his throat. "Richard, Patricia, perhaps we should know. This is completely inappropriate," Mom cut in. "Emma, leave immediately." I didn't budge. "I'm a voting member of this board. I have every right to be here." Dad laughed again, that same condescending chuckle I'd known my whole life. "A voting member, Emma. You own no shares. You're not on the board. Who told you could just walk in here?" "She owns 47% of the company," Thomas said softly. The words struck like a bomb. Mom slowly turned toward him. "What did you just say?" "She's been acquiring shares for 14 months, Thomas explained. "She's the largest single shareholder already for 6 months. I watched Dad's expression cycle from disbelief to anger. "That's impossible. The shares are closely held. Any transfer would need approval. They came from the employee stock pool and 3 board members who sold their shares," Thomas said. "All legal arm's-length transactions properly filed with the SEC." Mom's voice wavered. "Emma couldn't possibly have that kind of money. Based on your last valuation, 47% is roughly $440 million, I said quietly. Though realistically, given current performance, closer to $320 million, meaning I overpaid by about $120 million. The room went silent. Marcus typed furiously, "Of course," I added. "The purchases went through 3 separate LLCs. You'd have had to dig to connect them." Dad stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "This is a joke, Emma. What's your game?" "No game. I'm an investor, and frankly, a concerned one. The company is in real trouble." "She can't even read a balance sheet," Dad shouted, glancing at the board. "She's 28. Some junior analyst, what could she possibly know?" "She's a managing partner at Quantum Capital," Thomas interrupted. "She's run their tech portfolio for 2 years. Fund returned 43% last year." Mom paled. "Impossible." "You'd have told us." "Why?" I asked simply. "So you could dismiss it like everything else I've ever done." "Don't take that tone," Mom snapped, desperation creeping in. "Now, don't dismiss me in a board meeting," I said evenly. "I'm a majority investor now after buying an additional 8% from Daniel Rothstein this morning." The room went chaotic. 3 board members spoke at once. Marcus typed frantically. Mom and Dad just stared. Thomas banged his gavel. "Order. Everyone, calm down." "There's nothing calm about this," Dad muttered. If it's true, what do you intend, Emma? Save the company with your vast experience. I'll vote to approve Thomas's restructuring plan, I said. The one you were about to reject. Mom turned to Thomas. What plan? He slid a document across the table. Quantum Capital proposes a $200 million investment tree. Restoring R&D, hiring senior management. In exchange, a convertible note could increase their equity to 65% if performance targets aren't met. Absolutely not, Dad snapped. We won't be diluted into minority shareholders of our own company. You already are minority shareholders, I reminded them. I own 55% as of this morning. This is corporate rating. Mom's voice shook. You're trying to steal the company we built? I'm trying to save it, I corrected gently. If you declare bankruptcy, you'll lose everything. The company was on the brink. Without intervention, it would be liquidated. Its brands sold off piece by piece, and 240 employees would be left unemployed. My plan offered a very different outcome. The company survives, expands, and jobs are saved. Under your control, Dad spat bitterly. Under professional leadership, I corrected. I'm voting to keep Thomas as chairman, bring in Catherine Walsh from Innovate as CEO, and establish a new executive committee that will ensure leadership is accountable to the board and us, Mom asked softly. I met her gaze. You'll stay on the board, retain your salaries adjusted to market rate, and get the satisfaction of watching the company you built continue instead of being dismantled in bankruptcy. This is insane, Dad muttered, pacing and running his hands through his hair. You're 28, 5 years into your career, and you expect us to believe you have $440 million to invest in a struggling manufacturing firm? I managed $620 million as of last quarter, I said evenly. And that's not counting the $4.2 billion I oversee for Quantum Capital. The Chin Technologies investment is about 70% of my personal portfolio. Yes, it's a major commitment, but I've run the numbers. With the right leadership and capital infusion, this company could be worth $2 billion in 5 years. Marcus nodded slowly, and her projections are conservative. If we secure the SpaceX contract, she mentions what SpaceX contract, Mom interrupted. The one I've been negotiating for 4 months, I said. They need a specialized circuit board manufacturer for the next generation Starlink satellites. Chin Technologies has the perfect capabilities, but lacks the capital to handle the order. With Quantum's investment, production can scale. It's a $340 million contract over 3 years with renewal options. The room fell silent again. Dad froze mid-step. Mom gripped the edge of the table. Why? Mom whispered. With all your resources, why invest in us? You could have let us. Valor bought the assets for a fraction of the price in bankruptcy, because it's still the company you built, I said softly. Because 240 people rely on these jobs. Because the technology works, the brand is valuable, and the opportunity is real. And because I wanted to prove I could do it. Prove what? Dad asked. That I understand business, I said simply. The words lingered. Dad's face flushed. Mom looked away. Thomas cleared his throat. Let's take a 15-minute recess to digest this, then reconvene for a vote on the restructuring plan. The board filed out quietly, avoiding my parents' eyes. Marcus left his laptop open. SEC filings displayed. Thomas paused at the door. Emma, can we talk outside? I nodded and followed him into the hallway. That was brutal, Thomas whispered. Necessary, I replied. You could have warned them privately. I had tried. 3 months ago, I called Dad to discuss the company's finances. He told me to focus on my career and leave the business to him. They weren't going to listen unless forced. Thomas studied me. The plan is sound. Catherine Walsh is an excellent CEO choice. But this is going to ruin your relationship with your parents. What relationship? I asked. The one where they ignore everything I say? Where every success is belittled because it doesn't fit their definition of achievement? Where I'm still treated like a naive child? They're proud of what they've built, Thomas said. It's been their life's work. I know. I want to ensure it survives, but they have to understand that their methods aren't working anymore. Markets and technology have changed. They needed to adapt, but refused. Now they're forced to. Yes, Thomas said, nodding slowly. When you first approached me about buying shares, I almost declined. Too young, too inexperienced. Then I looked at your track record, the companies you'd invested in, the returns you'd achieved. You have an instinct most people take decades to develop. My parents taught me manufacturing, I said. Indeed, but unknowingly. They taught you to spot inefficiencies, analyze markets, and assess risk. You just applied it to finance instead of circuit boards. Ironic, isn't it? Very. We watched through the boardroom windows as my parents sat at opposite ends of the table, silent. They'll fight this, Thomas warned. They'll seek legal loopholes to block the plan. I anticipated that. I said, every transaction was properly documented. Arm's-length disclosures timely. Even the best lawyers won't find anything. How long have you been planning this? 14 months, I said. From the moment I saw the quarterly financials and realized how dire things were, they're brilliant engineers, but poor managers. Worse, they can't admit when help is needed. That's why the plan puts operators in charge, people who can scale a manufacturing business, manage supply chains, and oversee growth. Your parents can focus on engineering and R&D, not daily operations. Will they accept that? They don't have a choice. I control 55% of the shares. I can outvote them. That's not what I asked. No, probably not at first. Eventually, when the company stabilizes, they may understand, and if they don't, 240 employees keep their jobs and the company survives. The recess stretched longer than expected. When the board reconvened, my parents entered last. United at one end of the table, Thomas opened the session. We have a $200 million investment proposal from Quantum Capital for convertible notes and board restructuring. Discussion before the vote, please. Dad rose, regaining composure. Emma's actions may be legal, but they're unethical. She exploited her position, our vulnerabilities, to stage a hostile takeover of the company your mother and I built. Dad, I began, but he held up a hand. You quietly bought shares while living under our roof. You waited until we were vulnerable and seized control. And now we're expected to accept minority status in our own company. Catherine Walsh isn't an outsider, I said. She's one of the top operators in the industry. Innovate went from $50 million to $800 million revenue in 7 years. Under her leadership, she's not us, Mom said. She doesn't grasp our culture, our values, what we built here. With respect, Marcus said softly. Culture won't matter if the company goes bankrupt in 2 months. Mung spun to face him. And whose side are you really on, Marcus? I'm on the side of the 240 employees who rely on their paychecks, Marcus said steadily. I'm on the side of the pension fund that guarantees their retirement. I'm on the side of keeping this company alley-vanned. Emma's plan is the only one that actually works. That's not true, Dad shot back. There are other offers. We could— One offer, Thomas interrupted firmly. Davidson Industrial, $120 million for the assets in bankruptcy. Maybe 30 employees kept on for the transition. Then the facility shuts down. Production moves to Malaysia, and everyone else loses their jobs. There must be other options, Mom insisted. There aren't, I said softly. I've spent 4 months investigating every strategic buyer, private equity firm, and investment bank that might be interested. The market for specialized circuit boards is brutal. Companies with lower costs, better tech, and deeper pockets dominate. Quantum is willing to invest only because I am putting my own capital on the line and because I've secured the SpaceX contract contingent on this restructuring. You should have come to us, Dad said, his voice faltering for the first time. You should have told us what you were planning. I warned you 3 months ago the company was in trouble. You told me I didn't understand business. That was different. How was it different? I offered advice, flagged problems I saw, and you dismissed me, just like you've done my whole life. Whenever I tried to discuss business, strategy, or finance, that's not fair, Mom said. Isn't it? I said, looking her in the eye. How many times did you call my degree impractical? How often did you describe my job as cute or sweet? How many dinners have ended with me being told to leave the business and talk to people who understand it? The silence that followed carried decades of unspoken frustration. I didn't want it to come to this, I said finally. I wanted to help, to use everything I've learned to save the company you built. But you couldn't see me as anything other than the daughter who doesn't understand the real world? You're 28 years old, Dad said, his voice uncertain now. I'm 28 years old, I shot back, managing $620 million personally, with successful investments in 17 companies. I spotted the SpaceX opportunity you missed. I created a restructuring plan that saves 240 jobs. At what point do I stop being too young and start being someone you actually listen to? No one answered. Thomas cleared his throat. Time to vote. All in favor of the Quantum Capital restructuring proposal. I raised my hand immediately. Thomas did the same. Marcus, 3 others, 6 out of 11. Opposing votes included my parents and 2 of their colleagues for votes against. The motion passes, Thomas announced. Restructuring approved. Dad jumped to his feet. We'll fight this. We'll find a lawyer to prove Emma manipulated the situation, used insider info. Every trade was logged and disclosed, Marcus said quietly. I've reviewed every transaction. You can hire every lawyer in New York, Richard. It won't change a thing. Mom's face was unreadable, hurt, anger, something else entirely. There's one last item, Thomas said. Emma requested to speak to the full staff tomorrow at 10 a.m. to explain the restructuring and answer questions. I think that's appropriate given her position as majority shareholder. Absolutely not, Dad snapped. These are our employees, our company. I corrected gently, and they deserve to hear the plan from someone who can answer their questions about jobs and the company's future. Mom shook her head. What you've done today, Emma, isn't just business. You've destroyed our family over money and control. I've saved the company, I said firmly. Whether you can see that or not. Without another word, they left. The other board members exited more slowly, some congratulating me quietly, others avoiding my gaze. Soon it was just Thomas, Marcus, and me in the boardroom. That was the most dramatic board meeting I've ever attended in 35 years, Marcus said, exhaling. It had to be done, Thomas said. Richard and Patricia would have run this company into the ground before admitting they needed help. Do you think they'll recover from this? Marcus asked, as people, not executives. I considered it. Maybe, eventually, or maybe they'll never forgive me for proving them wrong. You did the right thing, Thomas said. Not the easy thing, but the right thing. I packed up my laptop. Tomorrow I'd face the employees. They'd have questions, many of them difficult. Emma, Marcus asked as I reached the door, the SpaceX contract, is it really solid? I smiled faintly. Verbal commitment from their VP of supply chain. Contract being finalized legally. Signatures within 3 weeks. Why? Because if we pull this off, the company doesn't just survive, it thrives. It becomes a key supplier for the biggest space company on the planet. That's the plan, I said. My parents taught me to think big. They just didn't expect me to think bigger. I sat in my car watching the Chin Technologies building as the sun set. 25 years of my parents' work. Innovation, struggle, success, and ultimately, failure to adapt. Now it was mine to fix. Thomas's message buzzed. Employee meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Conference room, be about 200 people. Most terrified. Be ready for tough questions. I typed back, I'm ready. 14 months of preparation, countless hours analyzing every line, every efficiency ratio, every cost center. I knew this company better than my parents ever did, but nothing could prepare me for the hollow feeling thinking of my mother's face as she left the boardroom, or my father's cracked voice asking why I hadn't come to them. I had tried countless times, every effort dismissed. Now they knew I understood business. Whether they'd ever understand why I'd done it was another question. I started the car and drove away. Tomorrow, I'd stand before 200 anxious employees and explain how we were saving their jobs, announce the SpaceX contract, introduce Catherine Walsh as CEO, and somewhere in the room, my parents would watch their inexperienced daughter show them she had just saved everything they built. Whether they'd forgive me or ever speak to me, again, was uncertain, but the company would survive. The jobs would be saved. That had to be enough.